In this video, you will learn to translate a phrase into a mathematical expression, as well as how to evaluate expressions. So to begin, we have some definitions that we must understand. And our first definition is the word expression. Now, an expression in the math context would be a mathematical phrase that has numbers, operation signs, or variables. So for example, you have 8 plus 4, that is an expression. 5 times 9 is an expression. X divided by 8 minus 3 would also be an expression. For each of these, we have variables, which would be a letter. We have operations, so like division or subtraction or multiplication or addition. Then we have numbers in there as well. Now, a variable would be a letter used to represent an unknown number. So for example, if you had x plus 3, x would be the variable because that is representing an unknown number. A constant would be a number. So for example, in x plus 3, 3 is the constant. That is the number part. And then we have what's called a coefficient. So co, that prefix means with. So what this is a number with the variable or in front of the variable. So it's a number written before a variable, and this is used to indicate multiplication. So for example, 12x, 12 is the coefficient because 12 is a number with the variable or in front of the variable, and it's used to represent multiplication. So 12 is the coefficient. And then x would be the variable because that is the letter representing an unknown number. And the coefficient could be negative also, by the way. So if you had a negative 12 in the front, that means you have negative 12 times x. All right, so negative 12 would be the coefficient. All right, so these are our definitions. Next, we need to know how to translate different phrases into an expression. So our four main operations would be addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So we're going to work through some different phrases that would be represented with the following operations. So when you see the phrase sum, so the sum of 7 and y, for example, sum means addition. And so here we're adding 7 and y. So that would be your translation. Or if you had the word increased or increased by, that also means addition. So if a number is increased by 8, that means we have some number. We'll call that n or x or whatever we want. We'll use n for this example. So n increased by 8. That means n plus 8. All right, so your translation is n plus 8. If you had the phrase more than also means addition. So here when it says 4 more than a number, it's going to be 4 added with some number, and we'll call that number n again because it's unknown. So we have n added with 4, n plus 4. So that is for addition. Next we have subtraction. One word is the word difference. Difference means subtraction. So when it says the difference between a number and 3, that means we're subtracting some number by 3. So the number, you can use any variable, and here we'll use x just because. And so we take x, and then we're subtracting 3 to get x minus 3. The phrase decrease by also means subtraction. So if a number is decreased by 7, that means you're subtracting 7 from some number. And that number is unknown, we'll call it x. So we do x minus 7, some number decreased by 7. Next phrase is less than. So 3 less than a number. This one be careful with because if it's 3 less than something, that means you're subtracting 3. So we're subtracting 3 from the number. So we take the number, we can use any variable, any letter, and we subtract 3. So here we have n for the number. We have n minus 3. So it's not the other way around. It's not 3 minus n. All right, it's going to be n minus 3. And then the word minus also means subtraction as well. So 5 minus a number means you do 5 minus, or subtracted by, some number, and we'll call that n. So this would be 5 minus some number. Okay, next we have multiplication. One phrase or word is the word times. So 4 times a number means we have 4 multiplied by some number. So we can write this as 4 and then times some number, we'll call that n. And remember, here in algebra, if you write the number right in front of the variable, that means multiplication. So you don't need to write the times sign, you can just write it like this, 4n. That means multiply the 4 by the n. Next word is the word product. So when it says the product of 3 and a number, you're taking 3 times some number, and we'll call that number n. So we have 3 times n, or you can write that as 3n. Remember again, the number in front without the times sign still means multiplication. And the next word is the word of. So of you might not think of as a word showing multiplication, but it really is. Because if you take 2/3 of a number, that means you take 2/3 times some number. So we would do 2/3 times some number, we'll call that number n. It's an unknown number. And again, we don't need the times sign because the number right in front of the variable means multiplication. So we've done addition, subtraction, multiplication. Next we have division. So for division, one word is the word quotient. So when it says the quotient of a number and 6, we take some number and divide it by 6. It's an unknown number, so we use a variable to represent that number. We'll call it n in this case. And we take n divided by 6. And remember, division you can write as a fraction. That is the same thing. You could also write that as n divided by 6. But it's probably best to get in the habit of writing your division as a fraction like that. Another word is the word divided by. So if you say a number is divided by 8, that means you take some number, we'll call it n, and then divide it by 8. So we have n over 8. Remember, again, the fraction means division. Or you could write it out like this, n divided by 8. That is all the same thing. All right, so here are some examples where you can get some practice with these different phrases. And let's see what you remember. So we have a few examples on this slide. First example is 5 less than 80. And you were to translate into a mathematical expression. All right, so for this one, 5 less than 80, we would have to take 80 and subtract 5 from 80. So this would be translated as 80 minus 5. Next, we have the quotient of 12 and 4. Quotient means divide, so we're dividing 12 by the number 4. So you can write it as a fraction, 12 over 4, or write it out as 12 divided by 4. The next phrase is 8 more than a number. Now the phrase more than, that means addition. So you're adding 8 to some number. And again, we can choose any letter for an unknown number. We'll choose the letter X in this case, just because. And so we're adding 8 to some number. So we have X plus 8. We're adding 8 to that number. Our next phrase is 2/5 of a number. Remember, the word of means multiply. So we have 2/5 of, or 2/5 times some number. We'll call that number X. So we have 2/5 times X. You don't need the times sign in between the number or the coefficient and the variable. That still means multiplication. So we have 2/5 X for our answer. Next example, we are told that the sum of 4 and a number is divided by 6. So the word sum means addition. We're adding 4 and a number. So we're taking a number and we're adding 4. So we have X plus 4, some number we'll call X, and then we divide that by 6. So we take x plus 4 divided by 6. And remember, the fraction bar means division, so you could write this as a fraction. X plus 4 divided by 6. And if you wanted to, you could write it like this. That would be the same thing, where you have x plus 4 and then the divide sign, and then 6. But just keep in mind that if you do write it like this, over here the second way, that you put parentheses around x plus 4. Because this entire number, whatever this equals, we take that and divide by 6. If you do not put parentheses around it, that is meaning, like for example, if you had x plus 4 divided by 6, remember order of operations, you would actually have to do 4 divided by 6 first, and then add the x after, which would give you a totally different answer. So the parentheses are important. So we've worked with translating different expressions. Now we're going to finish with evaluating expressions. When we say evaluate an expression, what we're doing is we're substituting a given value in place of the variable, and then we're solving. So for example, if you're told to evaluate the following if x equals 3, and what we're evaluating is 2x. So what we're doing is, to evaluate if x is 3, we plug a 3 in place of x. So this means 2 times x, right? The number in the front, the coefficient means multiply. So we have 2 times x, but you replace the x with a 3, so now we have 2 times 3, which would equal 6. So your solution would be 6. Now if you're told to evaluate the following if x equals 6, and you were told 3x minus 5, what you do again to evaluate is you're plugging in the 6 in place of x. So instead of 3 times x, again remember the 3 in the front means multiply, we would now have 3 times 6. So 3 times 6 minus 5, that would give you 18 minus 5, which would equal 13. So your solution for this one would be 13. Okay, we have 2 more examples. Next one, again, you're evaluating the following if x equals 3. And what you have is negative 4x. Now remember, again, this number in the front of the variable, so we call that the coefficient, the number in the front. That coefficient means multiply. So what we have is negative 4 times x. But in place of x, we're going to put in the 3. So now we have negative 4 times 3. When you multiply, and you have a different sign, so negative times positive, different signs, your answer is going to be a negative number. So it's going to be a negative number, and then 4 times 3 is 12. So your solution would be negative 12. One last question. Here we are told to evaluate the following if x equals negative 6. And what we have is 3x over 9. So for this one, when it says 3x, that means 3 times x. And so to evaluate, instead of 3 times x, we now have 3 times negative 6. So we have 3 times negative 6 divided by 9. So 3 times negative 6, we have a positive times a negative number, which the signs are different, so our answer is going to be negative, and 3 times 6 would be 18. So what we have is negative 18 over 9. And remember, the fraction means division. So what we have is negative 18 divided by 9. Well, 18 divided by 9 is 2. But then the negative, we have one number is negative, the other is positive. And the same rules apply as with multiplication, where if the signs are different, then our answer is going to be a negative number. So our final answer would be a negative 2. So in this lesson, we've learned how to translate into different mathematical expressions, and we also learned how to evaluate expressions. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.